So we built Amboss.space Lightning Network Explorer. So you could look up any node on the network, see their contact information, and decide if you want to create a Lightning channel to them and kind of create a joint account with someone else on the internet in order to create a decentralized payment system on Bitcoin.
Welcome back to the Zoom Out podcast. I'm your host, Tim Niemeyer. Today, I have the special pleasure of having Jesse Shrader, CEO and co-founder of Amboss Space, on the podcast. Jesse, thank you for joining me.
Tim, it's a real pleasure.
There's so many things that I want to ask. As you know, my channel is aimed primarily at people new to Bitcoin, and we go down the rabbit hole a little bit, and then we go a little deeper. And then we start talking about like the Lightning Network. And that seems to be a big kind of leap. Like you're going down the rabbit hole, and then there's this huge drop off to try and go from Bitcoin to Lightning Network and what that's all about. So a big portion of what I want to talk about is that. And you're the guy to go to because of Amboss Space, what you do. You've been in Bitcoin for how many years now?
Gosh, since 2017. So some quick math, about 7 years now.
7 years. Like that's a good portion of your life, huh?
It is. Decent portion.
I love that. So before we even get into that, so 2017, you're probably catching the run up of that big bull market, right? I'm guessing.
I did. I started to see all the memes and GIFs celebrating the price rise, and I just had to decide whether that was just too annoying, where I had to say just completely block everything, or join in on the party. And I decided to dip my toes in. Of course, I wish I had done more than dip my toes in at that point, because it was quite an incredible run.
Did you already have like the technology background? Were you already in that space before you even heard about Bitcoin?
Not really, but of course you have like a couple of touches that kind of really help set the stage. My background is more on environmental engineering, so I had some math background, but I ended up working more in like financial services, doing class action lawsuits.
Wow. Well, that's a big change. I mean, because tell me a little bit more about that. Like, give us an example of what your day was like with that.
Sure. So, like I had studied environmental engineering and was looking for something in like wastewater treatment. And most of that like study is about like looking at natural systems and how they operate. Also like managing like a dam, for example,
right.
Keeping track of the flows in and the flows out. And then kind of maximizing the utility that you could get from, say, for example, like a reservoir.
Right.
So there's going to be people boating, there's going to be water needs downstream, but also you need enough water storage for future use or for power generation. So all of these different flows, and I didn't realize how relevant that was until Lightning many years later. But then in looking for a job following graduation, there still wasn't much, after the 2008 financial crisis, because I had graduated in 2013 and had moved to Portland, and that was a pretty slow place to recover from 2008. Mm-hmm. But the people that were hiring were this class action lawsuit call center that handled the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. So it was generally providing bankruptcy information, but had pivoted over to class action lawsuits as that business started to ramp up, as businesses started to do a bit better and they had deeper pockets to go after. And then the first one was about overdraft fees. So banks would do these funny things where they would reorganize debit card transactions to maximize the overdraft fees that they could charge. And so I was looking for a way for people to get back control of their financial future. And that's what Bitcoin really, that's where it really hooked me, because it was regaining complete control of your financial future. getting back the money, stopping bank bailouts, and also, as I was learning, is improving payments overall.
Yeah, that blows my mind, because when I'm hearing about the water treatment, what was the exact phrase for that? The water, the job title. What was your job title for that? You said
Oh, like environmental engineer.
environmental
Yeah.
engineering, and hearing about the flows. Like, I can see how the connection between that and the Lightning Network. Personally, myself, just understanding how things are flowing is just. I want to dig into that a little later, but so I can see that totally makes sense. Like, that's a lot of what you're saying is a lot of what I got in for too. Um, the self-sovereignty, getting the control back, not being reliant on some overarching control structure. Yeah, and I was 2018 myself, so we had come down, and then it leveled off, and then my father of all people, a retired farmer, he says, you should probably look into this. And I say, okay, and then I buy some, and then it goes from like 6 to 3, just like that. But I had to keep learning. So, I was one of those that, like, within the first week, I was down 50%. But
oh man, brutal. You earned your stripes.
yeah, I earn them early and often. But hey, that's what it is. That's what we're here to do, and we're here to share that information.
Yeah.
So you get into Bitcoin. You have this environmental engineering background. How does that translate into, I want to go into Bitcoin full time? How do you get from one A to B on that?
One sat at a time, one step at a time. It's like as you get into it, you're watching the price run up, and then the price starts going down, and you have to answer that question for yourself of, do I sell this? And that's really what pushed me to do the research, because when something is moving that much in your portfolio, you really have to like understand it in order to get kind of the diamond hands for that
Mhm.
for the technology. And really for Bitcoin, you have to deeply understand it. So at as I was learning about like what is this Bitcoin thing that I bought, um, I was comparing or learning about the technology behind it as much as possible. So thanks very much to Andreas Antonopoulos for
Oh,
that, to
goat.
kind of highlight some of the tech. Um, and as I was learning about the tech, like how does Bitcoin solve this problem of money? And then I would compare it to, well, how does the US dollar work? And at each juncture, at each portion of the money, moving money across time and across space, I was learning that Bitcoin does it better. And that kept on becoming the case, to the point where I almost call this like a second orange pill moment, where you feel more comfortable holding Bitcoin than you do the US dollar, what you had grown up with. Um, and I feel safer now holding Bitcoin than ever before in my financial life.
I am absolutely right there with you, and that happened to me just a year, maybe two ago. And that's a weird thing, because then when you see the price just plummet, and everybody's like, you got friends checking in, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm sleeping like a baby. I don't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? But so
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
get
The
so
real
you,
Bitcoiners celebrate when the price goes down.
absolutely. So you get there, you're on this journey, you're understanding more and more, and is it just a gradual work into the technology space, the technology side of it, for you personally?
Um, yeah. I mean, it's always like a combination of things when you become so passionate about Bitcoin and about the technology that, like, of course, you want to contribute to it. You're seeing other contributions that other people are making, and trying to find out like where do I fit in here. And early on, I had tried to make a couple of purchases with Bitcoin, and this was late 2017. So the transaction fees were absolutely crazy. I think I paid about $60 in transaction fees for one purchase, and it didn't arrive soon enough. It wasn't confirmed in time for the transaction to be accepted. So that, I was buying from overstock.com, which is the place where you could spend Bitcoin early on.
Right.
And because it didn't arrive in time, they sent the transaction back to me once it had arrived, and then I had to do the transaction again.
Oof.
Um, and so that was a big motivator for saying Bitcoin as a transactional currency or a money, it needs to scale. It needs to scale better. And so what are the technologies available for that? And I had heard Andreas Antonopoulos talk about the Lightning Network. And so, my curiosity was piqued. So I
Which
had
I
to learn
believe
more
only
about this.
started in 2015, right?
Yeah, I think the white paper came out in 2015. The network really started up in 2018.
Yeah.
So it was early days. There was this theoretical thing. SegWit needed to happen, so a soft fork of Bitcoin, in order to fix the kind of transaction ordering. Um, and from there, I was just trying out Lightning to see what I could do with it. That's when I got connected with my now co-founder Tony, who had created ThunderHub, which is
Yeah.
like one of the first programs that a Lightning node operator will use. I mean, it kind of shows all the relationships that you have, and makes it very easy to send and receive Bitcoin over the Lightning network.
So let me throw an analogy at you. This was the analogy that came across to me. I can't exactly remember where I got it. Maybe Andreas, but the Lightning Network is like a bar tab for Bitcoin. Have you heard that analogy before?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And that's the only one that I've been able to use with friends to where they're kind of like, okay, I think I see. Is that the analogy you tend to use, or do you have your own analogy on like somebody who knows what Bitcoin is but no idea about Lightning?
I've got my favorite, and my favorite is talking about a joint account that you have with someone else. So maybe you've got a friend or a partner, and you kind of both put money into a single bank account. And in order for you to settle debts between each other or settle any payments, really you just update an agreement that says, when we decide to close this account, how much money will I get and how much money will you get?
Hmm.
And that's a much closer analogy to what's happening inside of a Lightning channel, which really is a contract on who gets what amount of Bitcoin at the end of this contract between two people.
Hey y'all, are you new to Bitcoin? You looking for a way to safely and securely store your Bitcoin? Check out the Bitcoin Advisors. These Bitcoiners are professionals that will provide you peace of mind so you can sleep soundly at night knowing your Bitcoin is safe. Remember to tell them Zoom Out sent you.
You can also take it further, because you can have multiple joint accounts, and a payment could actually flow, from one individual through another to a third person. And really, it's just updating two accounts payouts.
Yeah, I when I dig in a little bit, I like to describe it as just this like multi-leveled abacus, with all the channels, all these different people connected, and we're just moving these little beads back and forth at lightning speed. And the beads are actually Bitcoin, which brings up an interesting point. And it's not so much as a big of an issue now, but like a few years ago, everybody was like, Bitcoin's slow, therefore altcoins, shitcoins, what have you, right? And the answer is no, we have Bitcoin and Lightning. And they're like, why do you need something different? Is the conversations we would have over and over again. But the thing that you're talking about is this separate account that you two have. You're still transacting Bitcoin. You're not having something, another token or whatever that people can print out of thin air. It's legit Bitcoin. So that's something that needs to make sure to be said for the beginning investor, so to speak, is that
It really is just a contract between two people, and it's a contract that's denominated in Bitcoin.
yeah. So now you're into Bitcoin. You're starting to tinker around with Lightning to make it quicker and cheaper, right?
That's
Those
right.
are the main reasons. So that leads, when in this journey does that lead you to Amboss Space?
Yeah. So I had been working with Tony as he was building Thunder Hub quite a bit. I sent him a couple of ideas, and we were. He saw that I was helping out in the Thunder Hub chat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how you and I first got connected. Was just doing some basic troubleshooting for Lightning node operators, and so he reached out to me and suggested, hey, you ever thought about starting a business? Um, and I really hadn't, to be honest. But we decided to basically come up with a way to monetize Thunderhub. And we knew we were both passionate about Lightning and passionate about Bitcoin. And so we were looking for gaps to find, what was the thing that Bitcoin and the Lightning Network were missing. And early on, one of the pieces was just discoverability. Um, like one thing about being completely decentralized is there isn't a central coordinator, and people have to figure things out themselves. But social networks also operate the same way. There's not a central coordinator telling you who to be friends with. Um, you tend to figure that out by yourself. So, taking kind of the model of, Facebook or LinkedIn, where you've got some understanding of who these different people or entities are. And so we built the Amboss.space Lightning Network Explorer. So you could look up any node on the network, see their contact information, and decide if you want to create a Lightning channel to them and kind of create a joint account with someone else on the internet in order to create a decentralized payment system on Bitcoin.
So I'm on here actually. I'm telling myself to look myself up as Max Struthers. I used to have a much bigger channel, and I've kind of pared back since then. But I like it because, like you said, you're able to not. Why would I just create a channel to anybody, right? And that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand. So maybe we take it a little deeper here. And please correct me because it's been a while. I kind of backed off of my Lightning learning. We have different types of channels, really. You got the big dogs, the asyncs and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
You got the small people like me. I just want to buy something and spend in Lightning. You got I can't remember the phrase, but the connectors, the people that are in between the routers, I guess.
Yeah.
So where am I right? Where am I wrong in that?
I think you've identified the market segments, and those the early market segments in Lightning, and so from early days, the Lightning Network was just hobbyists. It was people that were looking to one kind of experiment with this technology, and that's where I fell down the Lightning rabbit hole. But I think eventually those folks are going to turn into more of the consumers. So they're looking to support. They're going to use Bitcoin for payments. So a node like that's going to create a couple of channels with their friends and maybe a couple of channels to some of the big dogs to have broad connectivity.
Right.
Yeah, they just want to reach the biggest part of the network that they can. And generally what people do, since every channel that you create is going to cost a Bitcoin transaction, you're going to try and reduce that cost. Try and reach as many places as you can. And essentially what you've done is, if you make like an analogy to transportation network, you're building highways.
Right.
And which cities do you want to be connected with in the transportation network? And you're building a money super highway over to these different destinations. And which destination has the best store, or aligns with where you would want to spend your Bitcoin? Do you want to spend it at crypto cloaks, or do you want to start getting mining payouts with nice hash?
Mm.
Or like, what does your economic behavior look like, and how can you optimize your payment network around that?
And this is where we come back to that what you were talking about earlier with the environmental aspect with the water, where it's all about flows, right? You need to
Exactly.
also keep into mind, I guess, the lightning. What is that? The lightning speak is girth. Like
Oh yeah.
you need to be able to have channels that can handle a certain amount of capacity, right? So I'm not just gonna start up a small channel with some guy, even though he might be well connected, a smaller channel. I might not use that channel to route my payment to whomever. Am I
That's
getting it right?
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, Back in my wastewater treatment days, we would talk about flow equalization. So, I mean, a wastewater treatment plant can only handle so much water all at once. And sometimes a big rainstorm might happen, and rainwater might start leaking into the sewer system. But you need to do something with all that water coming in. Otherwise, your wastewater treatment plant will fail. Now,
Yeah.
the same thing happens when you run a Lightning node, is that you need some place to put the payments. So you need enough capacity, or the real Lightning Network nerds will call this inbound liquidity, but
Yes.
really it's capacity to hold more Bitcoin, or for the wastewater treatment plant to accept more water,
Right.
um, in order to store it. And so a lot of the same concepts happen for Lightning. In order to receive payments, you're going to need to build out some infrastructure that has room to accept more payments.
So maybe let's switch into then where are the companies? I'm seeing a lot of action from exchanges, for example, that are
Yeah.
starting to use, like, Coinbase just came out just recently, right? Um, like David Marcus is building up LightSpark.
Oh yeah.
A lot of the main exchanges are using Lightning. I'm guessing they're not just hobbyists. I think this goes back to the other, like, main reason why we have Lightning in the first place. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, Bitcoin has a scalability problem. I mean, you can really do about 7 transactions per second on Bitcoin itself. But institutions have, started to get some serious interest, especially with the Bitcoin ETF. And exchanges, they have a mandate to make sure that their users have a good user experience. And I'm very excited to see Coinbase take real steps in that direction,
Right.
to ensure that they are prepared for the bull market, and to make sure that their users actually have a good experience using Coinbase. Binance had already integrated Lightning and is already prepared to scale all of the transactions that will need to happen on Bitcoin. Um, and that's simply just because of the interest there is in Bitcoin and in Bitcoin transactions. But now we've got competitive uses of the Bitcoin blockchain. There's people putting all sorts of things into it with inscriptions and such. But Lightning enables you to essentially lock in how much a transaction is going to cost. Because once you build the infrastructure in a Bitcoin transaction to accept payments, you don't need to do that every time you want to make a payment. You can still use the exact same infrastructure, and that can last many, many years. So you can kind of foster these payment relationships and be able to, one, improve the user experience for the exchange, and then two, just reduce the cost of transactions. And then third, reduce the risk involved in the payment system. And that's something that we've just started to experience
What do you mean
in
by that?
traditional payments. Well, one example is we were processing about a year ago. We were processing mid-month payroll for Amboss. I was trying to pay my staff,
Sure.
and my payroll provider had already withdrawn the money from our account.
Mm.
And then this funny thing happened where Silicon Valley Bank went under. There was a bank run.
Yeah.
And my payroll provider contacted me to say, "Hey, could you resend the mid-month payroll?" And the original payroll had already left my account. So what exactly do you mean?
Right.
Did you lose the money? Well, I learned that the money in transit, instead of before it reached my employees, it was being held at Silicon Valley Bank. And so now it was in question. So that taught me that there is counterparty risk simply in the processing time, even for ACH transactions. Merchants will also experience this with chargebacks. The money doesn't show up until 2 weeks later, and during that time, you might have one of your customers say that they didn't receive the goods, and they can issue a chargeback, which is a massive source of loss in traditional payments.
So this is a
But
fiat problem that is being solved by having a bearer asset being able to be transferred.
yeah, Bitcoin fixes this.
Yeah, it does.
You once once you have the money, like, there's no question about it. There's no one that can take it from you. You have cryptography to protect you, and Lightning brings that into real time. So you can have a transaction process into finality in a second.
And that's something that most people don't even realize, because what's the phrase? You don't need most people don't want to get fire insurance until their house is on fire, kind of thing. They don't realize it's something that is necessary, for businesses to continue to operate. And when you have that house of cards that is fiat, that is the banking system, all it takes is something like that to wipe it out, to show the need for that. I can totally see that from a risk perspective.
It's an important piece because we know that there's a debt problem, and we know that even when something small happens, like Three Arrows Capital, goes under, it has ripple effects, and that's kind of what affects some bigger players like Silicon Valley Bank, which is a massive bankruptcy. Also, things with interest rates, and basically, there's a whole bunch of risk within the traditional finance system simply because there isn't finality.
Well, and also, I would think that the centralization versus decentralization aspect, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong on this analogy, if we can go environmental, but like forest fires, we don't allow forest fires to, clear out the brush, and then we stop them, then all of a sudden we have this huge, multi-state kind of fire that's taken over everything. But if we just let the small fires burn, it's going to clear out. So, I mean, if a small company goes under on a Bitcoin standard, you would think that, yeah, it sucks for them and the people they're associated with, but that's not going to undermine the entire system, right? Because of that decentralization aspect.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to have small failures along the way,
Which are
because
learnable. opportunities to learn, right? As opposed
Exactly.
to saying we're not going to let anybody fail, and oh, by the way, we're also not going to learn and grow.
Exactly. I mean, you just got to keep getting back on that horse. I mean, you're going to fall down a couple of times, but you get up more times. But when you have a truly devastating fall, that happens when you build up all this systemic risk, that's where it becomes life or death. And like after experiencing like the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, I really don't want to experience another systemic failure event. I want to continue operating and to continue to grow on a more solid foundation using Bitcoin.
I love that. So you have Amboss Space, and I love what you're doing there. And I'm sure you have some forward-looking goals. Maybe not directly for Amboss Space, but lighting in general. So we have this, sidechain. We have this side contract between us, right? That we can do all these things. But there's got to be more going on there. Like, I know there's a lot of lightning development. Could you kind of give the listeners here just a little taste of where this is headed outside of just like a bar tab per se?
Yeah. So one thing that has happened in Bitcoin is transaction fees have increased,
Yeah.
and so we're always looking for ways to make it so that the entire world can be onboarded to Bitcoin. So we've seen some innovations like Cashew, Fedimint, and also innovations on Liquid, which is a side chain of Bitcoin. So you can kind of swap between the Lightning infrastructure and also another asset which is redeemable for Bitcoin. There's also the idea of taproot assets. So you can have another asset. So maybe you're not comfortable with the volatility of Bitcoin because it goes up and down in price. But if you just want to store, what you're familiar with is like dollars, you could have essentially a dollar valued asset and still use the same trustless infrastructure using the Lightning Network. And so that's been a big focus for Lightning Labs, who is behind the LND protocol, the Lightning Network daemon. So that's something that we're monitoring. As far as what Amboss is focused on is making sure that we have a robust marketplace to make these new connections as the economy changes. So we've got this completely shifting and growing Lightning Network. So for us, let's make sure that the infrastructure is in place to have an orderly growth, a nice marketplace where people can create new infrastructure and get rewarded for doing so. And so we created this Magma marketplace where people can offer to open new Lightning channels and set the rates for it, and then get paid for creating new infrastructure, which was for the first time ever that it was a way to earn yield on your Bitcoin without ever giving up custody. We always like interest on our bank account balances, but we tend to forget that where that yield is coming from is because the bank is making loans on our behalf, and we're getting a tiny fraction of that. We've got this fractional reserve system, but with Lightning, it's enabled a new way to earn yield on your Bitcoin without giving up custody. You don't have to trust anyone else. You're simply creating new payments infrastructure.
Okay. No, go ahead. I'm digging this. I'm taking notes.
So, we just took a team trip, and we went down to Buenos Aires for the BTC++ conference.
Nice.
And we saw just how big of a thing Tether was. And it really stunned me. As someone that is solely focused on Bitcoin, I have to admit that Tether has found product market fit in these economies where they have hyperinflation. And so for the folks for the Argentinians that have trouble getting dollars, the next best thing is to get a dollar denominated stablecoin, which was kind of where Tether fit. But now with Taproot assets, instead of having to introduce yet another blockchain that is centrally controlled,
Right.
you can decentralize that control. And you can have control in your financial system by using the Lightning Network for the infrastructure, but even hold another asset at the end with Taproot assets. Or we're seeing some really cool innovations with Cashew, which is like a Chaumian eCash, just completely private payments that still is interoperable with the Lightning Network.
So I feel like after this conversation, I'm going to go dust off my node. I'm going to get on some Amboss space. And you're saying, is that Magma, right?
Yeah. For the folks that just want to receive payments and, this is too much complexity,
Sure.
we created this liquidity automation service that automatically buys from the marketplace, and we called it Hydro. So
Hydro.
if you're going to start a business, you want to receive payments, Hydro is the way to go, and it'll just automatically purchase from the marketplace and find the lowest cost.
So my problem was, and I wonder if there's anybody who's watching this who actually does have a node, reach out and talk to me. But my biggest problem was keeping that balance of liquidity. And I'm talking, 2020, 2021. And by 22, I kind of just moved on to, because Bitcoin's so huge, there's so many different aspects, and I just tinker around the edges of everything. But I just couldn't keep liquidity where it needed to be. You're either drained or you got people pushing or pulling. It's that flow we talked about. And that's what I had trouble with. Now, I've heard there's been some solutions to that. Do you care to speak to that at all? It's some automation.
Yeah, there's a couple of things out there. This maybe more on the hobbyist side.
Right.
I mean, there's some automations that happen at the node level, changing your fee rates so things automatically balance.
And I'm asking, I'm being very selfish here and asking for myself.
The tact that we've been taking is, we've been crowdsourcing data about the Lightning Network.
Oh, cool.
There's an option in ThunderHub for people to share their Lightning channel balances. Now, that shares information that would otherwise be private. However, it gives us the ability to really finely grained do some supportive management for your Lightning node so that you don't have to think about it. When you're sitting around, you tend to forget, your brain cannot keep track of everything. So you don't know what your feet are feeling right now. Mm-hmm. You tend to forget about that. You filter it out. And
you don't see the nose because
but your brain is on autopilot managing all of those things and deciding what to focus on. So the same thing happens when, people run their Lightning node. They just want to receive payments. And so, our system is really focused on making sure that you can continue your operations without having to think about it and without giving up complete control of your Lightning node operations. So once we know what what the inbound liquidity is for a Lightning node, we can start to run payment simulations. So we can simulate payments coming from anywhere in the Lightning Network and see if they're able to arrive at your node's destination. And so we can use those simulations to actually do the next generation of autopilot, which is something that we're keenly focused on to make payments happen without needing to hire someone to monitor your node and rebalance channels and all of these things.
And that's exactly
this is where we're headed.
And that's what I'm personally looking for, because I was that guy who was interested, who had just enough technical knowledge to get myself into trouble. You know what I mean? But not enough to or enough time to really just dig in to understand all that. That to me takes Lightning from that hobbyist level to something that like you said, can scale to where people can actually use it and not have to have that be their full-time, part-time job. I love that. So
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm probably just now that we had this conversation, I'm gonna be in your ear all the time being like, so Jesse, what do I do? No. I'm gonna be hooking up with some Amboss space after this is what I'm saying. That node's getting dusted off.
Awesome. The biggest thing is, since we don't have credit or debt within the system, is making sure that payments work as much as possible. So always keeping that payment reliability high. The simulations give us an ability to do that. And the other piece, we just came out with research on using machine learning to improve pathfinding. So making sure that you can actually pay to the destination. And so we've trained a machine learning model on kind of guessing what the state of lightning channels are, and using that as our first try for issuing a payment. And we're doing benchmarking studies right now to see how much we can improve. And in our benchmark, the first trial we ran showed the L&D pathfinding it worked about 27% of the time. And that kind of matches with my experience trying to pay a lightning beer tap at a conference. But our machine learning pathfinding brought that up to 89% in that first trial. So this should be a step change in Lightning Network user experience to improve upon Bitcoin user experience.
So for pathfinding, I'm just trying to help listeners understand. If you can picture literally all the nodes and all the connections in between all the nodes, pathfinding is finding the most direct and cheapest route from where you are to where you're going to go. Because you're not always going to go. Sometimes if you and I have a channel, I mean, that might be the most direct route. But if there's somebody else in between, for various reasons, that might be the route I want to go, or it might be cheaper or faster. Is that a basic description of path?
You can say that Amboss is Waze, the navigation app for the Lightning Network.
I get
that. So for every time you want to look up, how do I pay to this destination, or how do I navigate to this city?
Right.
Which roads should I take? And we're doing that for the Lightning Network. So we can help optimize, which path you're going to take, and help you avoid the traffic jams and whatnot. Any offline nodes, help you get to the destination.
It's like instead of "Hey Siri," it's going to be "Hey Amboss, give me this cheapest payment from here to there." I love that. Well, I think
perfect.
I love this. And is there anything else that you wanted to point out about Amboss before we wrap up? Because I'm like really geeked. I'm going to turn this off and I'm literally going to go to my node and start playing around.
Perfect. I don't want to stop you, but we're working on more pieces. So we've got amboss.space, and we also have a new product for enterprise nodes and for serious business operators where risk management becomes a concern, and also general payment operations. So that's Reflex is rpo.dev. So Reflex payment operations.dev. And with that, we've got more of the automated workflows and also a lot of the risk management pieces, because we don't want Elizabeth Warren coming and shutting us down, but we need to give certain answers to certain questions that she's going to ask about. Do you have a policy in place to not pay terrorists and money launderers? And Reflex gives them the ability to say, yes, we do have something in place. So that's like the last piece of what we've been working on.
Cool.
But really, we've been a seed stage startup building these tools and looking for kind of what is the future of Bitcoin for payments, and how do we scale this amazing technology to the rest of the world.
I love that. That's a great place to stop right there. All right. Well, Jesse Shrader, thank you so much for your insights and being able to break down some really complex conversations about Bitcoin and Lightning. that actually helped me out. I thought I had a good grasp, but I feel a lot more confident after this conversation. So thank you for joining me on Zoom Out Podcast.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Tim, and I'm excited for you to take control of your payment system.
It's happening. It is happening. All right. Well, you take care. And I since you're in Nashville, I will see you in Nashville.
See you then, Tim.
All right. Take care.
Take care.